Welcome to the Bucket List Project podcast, a weekly show that talks about stories from my pursuit of nomadic lifestyle around the world, interviews with interesting people who I met in this journey, and a generous dose of thought provoking conversation around travel as a lifestyle choice. If you love to listen on topics revolving around travel, then this will be your perfect companion for the ride to office, your morning jog, or in general when you're winding down for the day. We will have new episodes releasing every Friday, so do share and subscribe to our podcast and get your weekly share of travel inspiration. Kangna's character in Queen, Rani Mehra, was an inspiration for Indian women across ages and social structures. She shattered so many stereotypes about solo female travelers in India. Her character had interesting dichotomy. In the beginning, she was traditional, naive, and sheltered. However, over the course of the movie, she emerges fearless, compassionate, and strong willed. There were evocative moments in the movie which I believe was very well taken and left a lasting impression with some hard hitting message. Few narratives that were broken for me from the movie were solo female travelers are unsafe. The mugging scene in the movie is pivotal moment in Rani's journey. It is a moment where she is forced to confront the harsh realities of the world, but it is also a moment where she discovers her own strength and resilience. The other narrative, solo female travelers should not socialize. Her friendship with other guests at the hostel in Amsterdam was a beautiful reminder that connections and community can be found in the most unexpected places. It was a friendship that transcended borders and cultures, united by a shared humanity. The other narrative is that solo female traveler is a Western concept. It was a master stroke by the director to portray Kangana as an average middle class Indian woman and not a young modern urban metro career woman that is generally expected to be showcased in such movies, right? This broadened the horizon that even the most traditionalist can find joy in solo travel and discover themselves. She, grooving to old Hindi music, wearing salwar kameez in the alleys of Paris and Amsterdam, was a statement in itself. Rani's character was a breath of fresh air and a role model for Indian women everywhere because she showed that solo travel is a viable and enjoyable option for Indian women of all ages and background. It was also a sign of times to come. 2013 is when the movie released, and now fast forward to 2023. In just a decade, the solo travel narrative has gained mainstream popularity and it's not considered a wild thought anymore. Agreed that there is a long way to go before we change this narrative that women need permission to travel, but we are taking baby steps towards that. In fact, Meta and Google's recent influencer trends study suggests that women are leading the way when it comes to travel influencer segment in social media. Maybe it's because they are more expressive, relatable, creative, and lending their voice to so many women who want to live this globe-trotting life. I have one such travel influencer on this episode who is trailblazing her way across social media platforms and making a statement of sorts. I'm Srinath Shankar, your host, a Padi scuba instructor, co-founder of Pick Your Trail, India's fastest growing leisure travel brand, a digital nomad, and a slow travel proponent. Today's topic of podcast is Fearless and Fabulous, Indian Women Who Travel Solo. In this episode, I'm going to be joined by Ms. Aakanksha Monga, digital content creator, travel influencer, globetrotter, solo traveler, and an explorer covering every corner of the world one day at a time. She has almost million plus army of fans combined across Instagram and YouTube, which she calls her second family. In fact, her profile reads that she travels for the stories, kindness, and people, which is a statement by itself. Hi, Aakanksha. Welcome to the podcast. I had an even longer list of descriptors to introduce you just by going through your content that's there in Instagram and YouTube. But I had to settle for this. So, how do you identify yourself as a traveler and an individual beyond that Instagram page and that YouTube page? Would love to hear it directly from you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Like I said, that I've been traveling with Pick Your Trail, and now being on a podcast with you is awesome. So, just to give a quick introduction about myself, most people know me as the travel content creator who's basically chasing the next adventure or the next offbeat experience. But I think at the core of it, who I am is a storyteller. I love telling stories now, be it around basically what my current interest is, my current passion is. Traveling is something I've been obviously passionate about since I was a kid, and I love doing that by the end of the day because I'm able to tell stories about places, about people, and I think travel kind of brings that passion together. In addition to that, I've always been very interested and curious about business, about marketing, which also at the core of it is a form of storytelling, right? I mean, what is marketing if not that? So I think that would be a succinct description. I'm very, very passionate mostly about people, and I feel like everybody has something interesting to teach you, something interesting to tell you, and that's something that I gain a lot when I travel, and I don't think I can ever get enough of that. So that's basically always been my pursuit via travel, is to meet people from all different backgrounds, from different life perspectives, what we wouldn't have imagined, because we grew up in a bubble of our own. So traveling really helps you see that other side, other perspectives, see the kind of truths other people can have. And that's essentially what I chase. And my creating content helps me get there and also helps me spread the word because, yeah, I'm passionate about people getting to know that, and I feel like the world's a better place if we are more tolerant, if we understand different cultures, the nuances more. So that's the goal.
Of course, it very clearly comes out that you love travel and you seem to be very passionate about it. But even today, certain Schengen countries require solo women like you to provide no objection certificate from a male guardian, like a husband or a father, to travel solo. How do you fight these stereotypes, especially when you want to tell stories and you want to travel solo and you're so passionate about it, and at the same time you have to fight such stereotypes? How do you do that and how do you overcome it? Can you give me some examples?
I think I would say the answer to that also lies in traveling, for me at least personally. I personally also did not know that this was even a possibility, and I think that's exactly what I meant when I was saying that as growing up, we all have limited narratives, we have a limited belief system because we are the sum of the people that we spend our time with and now the content that we consume, right? It's a combination. So growing up, at least for me, the content that I was consuming, because YouTube was still newer, like I'm talking about when I was in like my teens, YouTube was still like relatively newer. It was mostly Western media and the friends that you have in your parents, and I didn't get to see women traveling solo as a thing. So that concept in my mind didn't even exist, that this is a possibility, that people even do that, which sounds so funny now that I do it almost like, I can just pick up my bag and go. But that's how it was. And it only changed when once I was in Himachal and I met another female traveler from the United States. And then I realized, okay, wow, this is possible that somebody can just travel from there to India at the age of 18, because my first thought was, oh, you're here for probably work. And then she was like, no, I'm 18 and I'm just traveling. To me, that was a big revelation in itself. And I think that was the day I realized that, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, and I want to be able to figure out how I can do this. It's not like she's built different than I am. She's just brought up in a different culture, which really shouldn't stop me from doing what she's doing or what anybody else is doing. And I think that was the first thought that was kind of seeded in my head, at least. And then it obviously, the barriers obviously overcoming was just parents, number one. I think that is always for any girl, especially, I think even for guys in India, just having that conversation of why do you even want to go alone? I mean, that doesn't make sense to them in the first place, because it's not something they've done, not something they've heard of. Similar to my belief, their belief is like one step further back, right? Because they haven't seen it at all, and they're not going to Dharamkot and Dharamshala and meeting these people. So for them, it's even a step behind. So I think those were the main hurdles that I had to sort of overcome, was basically explaining, also going behind their back and then kind of figuring my way out. There's no way to, I feel like, do it in a straight, very, straight line ki, okay, I'll do this and this, but it's more, you have to take your shortcuts and kind of figure it out. But personally, I get this question asked a lot, in the sense that people say that it's very brave, but I feel like once I got over that mental barrier, I don't feel like I did something brave. Like, I don't feel like when I do this, I feel like I've accomplished something when, yes, I climb higher mountains or I do something like physically challenging. But for me, the literal only thing I think that I had to overcome was just the mental barrier. And then it all kind of dissipates. There's no fear. And once you do it, even when you travel, generally you meet people, you kind of realize that the world is really not as bad as media tells you. I think it's probably a percent of what we hear. And personally speaking, the one thing that I was always told is that obviously it's always a safety concern. It's never about you can't do it. It's always it's not safe for you. And after traveling solo to so many countries, I do feel that I've never really felt unsafe. And in fact, if I have felt unsafe, it was in one of the Western European countries. So it's never really about safety from these statistics that we see, that, India is unsafe, this place is unsafe. I think it's very situational. It can also happen right outside your house. It can happen on the street close to your home, or it can happen in a completely different country. So I think that also is something I learned out of experience. But yeah, I think for anybody I'm very happy that now we have so many women on social media as well who are talking about traveling solo. And now people at least are able to get over that mental barrier. And I think once you do that, then that's step number one, the battle's won.
Interesting that you seem to have a lot of clarity in terms of how to overcome the challenges that you faced, in terms of who you are and who you are not. For our audience, can you walk us through your decision to pursue this journey? I know that you've told me how you got inspired, but your decision to pursue this journey as a travel influencer and as a content creator, how did that come about? Would be lovely if you can connect the dots of the journey with different experiences that you had or different milestones you had along the way.
Mm. Yeah, I think, I would say, if I had to just take you through how I was, I mean, while growing up, for me, I've always been somebody who, obviously, I was good at school, but I always needed something creative to do on the side. And I've dabbled in many different aspects. So I used to draw a lot at one point. Art was my thing, and I was like in school selling art, like doodles. And so it's always been a combination. I've always figured out how to weirdly make money off the hobbies that I had since I was like 12 or 13. So that was the first thing that I did, was like sell my doodles for people to put it behind their phone covers and stuff like that. So it was like more of a school small business. Then it started from that to I went into dancing. I was very big on that. So it's always been jumping from passions to passion. So I was definitely a master of none, the jack of all trades. But as now the saying has been completed by Instagram, that it says that you say that the jack of all trades is better than the master of none. So I seek validation in that. But yeah, for me, I've always dabbled in a lot of creative fields, be it poetry, drawing, then dancing. But I think for me, traveling has always been something that's been a constant, because my dad is in the army, and we've moved every 2 years.
It's funny, even I'm from my father is from a Air Force background, and we've also shifted quite a lot in my early childhood.
Oh, wow. I feel like I should have guessed that earlier, because I did catch the vibe, but I wasn't sure. So I feel like, yeah, so my dad's in the army, and we've moved every 2 years. I think the maximum I've ever stayed in a place was around 6 years when we were in Delhi. So beyond that, I've never stayed in one place for too long. So I think traveling became a way of life for me, and is a way of life. It's not really something that I dabbled in only after school or after college. It was something that I've done all my life, right? So the only thing that now I was looking forward to was, after graduating school, doing it by myself and not with my family, because we've done that so often earlier. And yeah, I think when I was in college, I basically went into studying business because that was my next most interesting thing for me, which is, like I was saying as well earlier, since I did a lot of that in school as well. So the next thing that I started doing was studying business, but at the same time I would travel a lot. So when I was in college, I basically figured that Delhi University doesn't care about attendance at all. All they want is your grades by the end of it. So that was a great loophole for me, which meant that I didn't really go to college as much. I would just study before the exams, and I would spend the rest of my time traveling close to Delhi or around Delhi. And I would pick up multiple internships that would, help me get that money to go to places like, let's say, Himachal, Uttarakhand, places around Delhi that would be like one bus ride away. And at that time, I didn't even have social media. I had no Instagram, not even a personal account, because I was very anti social media, which is very ironic. So I would just spend time traveling and then coming back studying exams. And I was very set on the fact that I want to be a consultant, because that was the job that I saw would give me both. I thought, okay, I become a consultant, I get to travel a lot because you work out of client offices, and I do what I love the most apart from that, which is like work in strategy, do all of that, which was a dream that was shattered as soon as I joined consulting and realized that the travel is not as much and the work hours a lot more, and the work is also not as interesting as I think
So the bubble burst, is it?
the bubble was burst. Yeah, for sure. I feel like the dream that's sold to you in college and what the reality looks like is poles apart, as it is for almost everything that's sold as like this golden opportunity sort of a dream. So yeah, I think while I started working at Bain, and somewhere along the line I realized that, okay, I can't do this only. I need to do something creative on the side as well, and I need to figure out how I can travel. And to be honest, initially my page was just a means to an end. I realized, okay, from a perspective of opportunity, the best thing to do right now is, let's say I love traveling, I know how to present my thoughts creatively, let me start a travel page, and maybe that helps me travel more alongside my job. So I'm able to, like, when I do go for trips, I'm able to, let's say, cut down my costs a bit, figure it out that way. So it started off as like a means to an end, and then when I started it, I started slowly realizing how passionate I am about it, in terms of being able to tell those stories and being able to combine, actually, because by the end of the day, people see creators as creators, but you're running your own business. It's like almost a small startup, right? With the kind of, like, you need to figure out your avenues, you need to figure out how to work with brands, whether you want to diversify. There's so much to it. And I started doing that on the side. So for around a year and a half while I worked at Bain, I also created content on the side, grew my audience to like a decent size, and was doing that completely like just on the like post work hours and on the weekend. Then I quit Bain and moved more in towards like the creator side, and started working at LinkedIn. They'd launched their new team of creator managers. So we were called they were like the Avengers of LinkedIn when they were launching this sort of vertical to create like a social, like basically transform LinkedIn into more of a social media platform, which is what it's becoming now, right? Yeah. So I started working there, which brought me even closer to this space, one step closer to like being able to now talk to more creators, being able to meet creators who are way bigger than me, who've been in this space, because now I was on the other end of it. I was not the creator, I was the person.
Nice. So you were on the other side. Now you were the algorithm and you were telling people how to beat it.
Exactly. So it was a very interesting role that I was playing there because I was creating content for myself on Instagram and YouTube. I was working on with LinkedIn to see how content should be created, how a social media platform works, and I was working with other creators to help them create better content on LinkedIn and strategizing for them. So it really helped me learn a lot because I would talk to those creators, I would learn from them, and I spent around 7 to 8 months there before I realized that okay, I think for me to succeed at anything, I need to have my like I can't have my feet in both on both sides. I have to be in one place and commit to one thing and take that risk, which is when I then decided to go full time towards travel content creation, because by the end of the day that is has always been kind of.
So when did this realization hit you, or which year was it?
This was 2022. Yeah. So this was 2022 July, August time. So that was the first thing, and I actually right after, because I thought that okay, fine, this is now kind of, I just want to focus on it for a year. I knew that I have strong enough like corporate experience that if I do want to come back to it, I can make my way back to it somehow. So in case if I don't like doing this full time, but I really wanted to try out for a year, how much can I grow it if I just focus, like laser focus on one thing. And I think, I mean, that turned out to be a very good decision, I feel, because I mean, honestly, I really saw the biggest difference in my journey when in that 1 year, like the 1.5 years that I've given to content creation solely, because that's where I saw maximum growth. That's where I saw maximum evolution in terms of like how to turn this from just like a creator working into an actual business with a team with like different ideas, and that can only happen if you have like your focus there. So yeah, I think that's kind of what the journey has been. And now when I think about, I was reading this book by the diary of the almanac of Naval Ravikant, and he talks about this. There's a part on it where he talks about creating wealth for yourself, and he says that everybody needs to identify what their specialized knowledge is, because every single person is unique. Like they have one thing that is unique that nobody else can replicate. And if you identify what your specialized knowledge is and you kind of see how that can maybe make you some money, then you're kind of set for life, because then you I mean, you kind of know the direction you want to go in. And I think my specialized knowledge since I was a kid was always being able to talk to people. I've always been able to talk to anybody, everybody, no matter the age, no matter their background, and and be creative. So I think I was able to figure out that this is actually one of the best combinations, where because I'm traveling, I'm talking to people, I interview them, I bring their stories out, I'm able to do that, and I'm able to be creative and put that in the form of storytelling and talk to my community. So I think it was a match made in heaven that way.
If I may ask, I assume that this is your full-time profession now. And if yes, how does your typical week look like, and what is the kind of income streams you have created for yourself to sustain this as a, full-time career?
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah, I mean, when I started out, like I said, I was just like a one-man army. There was nobody else working with me. So slowly, I experimented. I would say it's all been a learning curve for me to kind of build that and get to. And I still wouldn't say that I'm at the place that I want to be with like how the team structure looks. But I would say that I mean, now if I had to say currently, I have a team wherein I kind of identified the different tasks that I, let's say, do throughout the day, and how can I kind of organize them now into different buckets. So I think the biggest task that any creator has apart from creating content is obviously how do you generate your revenue. And the first way to generate revenue, the most obvious one, is via brand sponsorships, wherein once you have a sizable audience, and also an audience that is personally invested in your journey, invested in what you're saying, and you have created that like authentic voice for yourself, that's when brands want to kind of work with you to to basically market themselves, to have their product name out there attached with you, right? So that's basically the way brand sponsorships work. That's usually the biggest bracket, I would say, of income when it comes to for any creator. So for me, it was very important to get help with managing that aspect, and that was the first person that I started working with, who's now my manager. I also dabbled with working with agencies, but personally didn't love that experience too much, because then you're also kind of like a cog in the wheel with a lot of other people in the same agency. So that was my experience. I love working still with one manager who's kind of, we work together as a team. They personally are invested in me. They know the values that I stand for, because for me personally as a creator, it's very important that I'm able to sleep peacefully at night. So I don't ever want to promote something, say something that I wouldn't say to my mom, to my friend, if they ask me, right? So it has to be the same thing. And that's what I faced with agencies, where they kind of like push you towards, let's say, taking up things which are maybe not the most authentic, what you don't want to say, which I didn't want to do at all. So I think working with a manager who understands your vision, who understands your values, then you kind of start getting sponsorships also in that direction. So that was a very important building block. After that, I got somebody who is like the head of content with me, who helps me ideate now. Basically, if you want to scale and you want to be able to create content, because when I'm traveling, I can't edit on the road, right? If I'm on a hike somewhere for 10 days, it's not possible. So things need to be done either in advance or post when I'm back. So the days when I'm actually not traveling are the most important days for me in my content, in the content space. Yeah, because I have to put it together. I have to put everything that I've done now together and kind of make it look presentable. So for that, working with the person who works as the head of content is great, because we can then kind of scale. We can do a lot of ideation. I can produce like 30 pieces of content that then keep going out when I'm also traveling. So consistency has played a key role in my growth, and I acknowledge that. So I feel like consistency is a big part of any creator's journey. So end up doing that. So she's somebody who works with me as the head of content. Then I have an editor now, which has been a huge relief, because editing everything by myself was also a big task, not able to scale that way. So recently, around 4-5 months back, I got an editor, full-time editor on board, who now works with me, and we kind of play tag between who does what. Like, some videos I'll edit that are very personal to me, some he does. So that's another person. And yeah, that's essentially like the core team. And then you have different people working depending on the projects that come up. And you'd asked what my usual day looks like. I think the only days that are the same are the ones when I'm in one place and I'm working, like I said, when I'm not traveling. Other than that, I would probably say every single day looks very, very different when I'm traveling, because it depends on where I am, what I'm doing. So
Okay, so there seems to be an army behind you and the incredible content that you create. So you have kind of figured out a structure for yourself how to scale this, right? Now, talking about that content creation itself, no, it's such an unforgiving space to be in. Originality, fresh content, first mover advantage, letting audience into your private daily life can be very intimidating. How do you plan your content calendar to stay ahead of the game?
Very good question. Um, I think exactly what you'd said earlier, that I think you need to identify the things that you don't want to do before the things that you do want to do, to kind of eliminate that, so that you also don't get distracted in the process and end up making like those, I would say, errors in terms of what you say. Like you said, because I was watching a podcast with, I think, Tanmay Bhatt recently, where he said that as a content creator, by the end of the day, as harsh as it sounds, your life is kind of on sale 365 days. That is what it is. I mean, it sounds a bit harsh, and I'm a content creator myself, but it's true. So there's no, yeah, I mean, you can't run away from that. So then I think you need to decide what part of your life do you want to put on sale. that's kind of what you need to decide there. So for me, I've always been very clear since day one that I will never put out extremely personal parts of my life out there. So, and I've stuck to that. My page is only about travel, so nobody knows. I mean, now we're talking, so they would get to know that, okay, I'm also very interested, like I mentioned, in business, marketing, etc. But people don't know that off the bat, from my page. You can't gauge that because I don't talk about it. I don't talk about my family, my friends, my relationships, politics, nothing, or my views on money, none of that, because I always were very, very clear that, okay, if I start dabbling into all of that, it becomes too wide a space, and if I put all of that up to on sale, then I can't run away from the fact that then people will comment on that, and that's obviously fine because I made that conscious decision to put it out there. So I can't expect to not have that. So that's why I only put like one aspect. It's just one sphere of my life out there, which is traveling, which is not like, which is maybe, I would say 40% of who I am, or maybe 30% of who I am, but it's just 30% of my life out there. And I think that really helps because then I'm able to take a break. Now I've at least started, because I also see the evils of social media. It's not all golden. So I think it's very important for me also to sometimes take a break, remove myself from the situation, not look at, like be able to delete all the apps of my phone if I want to for 2-3 days. And that can only happen if only one part of my life is out there. And yeah, I think that really, really helps. The intersection that I found was just talking about one part of my life, which has been travel. And if I do decide to dabble in another section, that would also be like a small part. It would never be 100 or 90% of my life. So that's a conscious decision I made. Yeah.
A lot of the points that you mentioned, I can kind of relate with it because my wife also went through similar challenges as she was building her YouTube audience. Now, as a follow-up question, I wanted to ask you, given that you are appealing a lot to the Gen Z and the latest generation, right? How do you handle the cancel culture given you are a subject of public opinion on the content you create?
Personally, so far I've been lucky enough to not face any like extreme cancel culture. Like, I mean, there are people who get completely written off for brief periods, but I also feel like if that does happen, I'm very aware of the fact that the internet has like a goldfish's memory, and if you just kind of come back with like a different proposition, I don't think it would be too hard to come back because you see that happen all the time. Thankfully, like I said, for me, I haven't gotten cancelled as such. I personally feel that travel is actually the most, I would say, a safer space in that regard because you're not playing with politics, you are not playing with, lifestyle choices. It's more like you're showing people places, everyone's kind of happy to see those. But yeah, you have to be, I think, very conscious about, obviously, by the end of the day, anything that I put out, and as my audience grows bigger, I think about it 4 more times or 5 more times as to whether what I'm saying could that possibly hurt somebody's sentiments and all of that. So personally speaking, I haven't ever gotten cancelled. Yes, of course, I do get hate from time to time, which is obviously, like you said, hate is also a form of opinion, and love is also a form of opinion, so you get both. And at the end of the day, by the end of the day, I feel like if I myself have an opinion, that's the only way I can be a creator, and I cannot expect, it's like, this is a very generic answer, but I literally can't expect everybody to be the same. I mean, that's exactly what I propagate, that not everybody doesn't think the same, do the same. So obviously people who don't like something I said or are very, very opposed to that, I just see that as a form of the sphere of life that they live in. So maybe they don't understand or can't relate to what I'm saying, and I think that's where it kind of ends. And I also really feel that a lot of creators don't realize that the power of whatever people are saying to them lies in their hands. So if somebody says something to me that I don't like, I literally just block them. It takes like under a minute and that's it. It's out. So I don't think about replying to them or engaging, because the power lies with me in those terms. So if I want to block that, I can, or delete it, I can just do that and kind of move on and see what I want to focus my energy on by the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, from whatever you're saying, I get a feeling that you've been extremely lucky that you have a very loving audience who are very accepting of the content that you make and are able to relate with you, which is very rare and at the same time extremely lucky for a content creator also. That's what they would love to have, right? Moving forward, now that you've been very active on Instagram and YouTube, that platform has seen the Western travel content creators have a head start over Indians. They already have prevalent backpacking culture, break here, digital nomad behavior, all of that, right? And this means that they've been the first on the platform creating travel content very, very differently. How wide is that head start now, and how are Indian content creators catching up with that, according to you?
Interesting. I have always had the vision personally of seeing myself as a global travel content creator. That's why I also created content in a language that can be understood by everybody in the world. Obviously not every single person, but English is something that most people, let's say in the world, like the most popularly spoken language, right? So that was actually the goal. There was nothing else. I mean, I can speak Hindi perfectly. It was just that was the vision that I had to position myself as a global content creator. And I think slowly, I mean, it's very hard because the algorithm obviously pushes your content out to the geography that you're creating content in, and I don't have an American accent. So I actually realized that it's just so much easier for anybody who has an American accent to grow, because we consume, not just us, be it people who are from Germany, be it people from the Netherlands, whenever people are consuming English content, they consume American content. And American content it's so relatable. That accent is so easy to relate to and understand, even though they're not from your country or whatever. So I think that was one thing that I realized eventually, why American content creators, travel content creators are by the end of the day most popular amongst Indians, amongst Europeans, everywhere in the world, is because of I would say, the accent relatability. That's like my hypothesis, I would say. But I can see that happening for myself now that I have a lot of connects, a lot of creators who I've always looked up to in the Western space, who now follow me, who have discussions with me regularly. I've collaborated with some of them as well in the space. So I personally, that is still my vision, and my end goal would always be to position myself as a global content creator. And I do feel that the Indian ecosystem is catching up very, very fast in terms of travel content creation, especially, I would say, within India as well, because India itself was a place where I feel like people would mostly go to like these set destinations that were, set for us from like our parents' generations, be it like, at least pehle it was just, okay, like Shimla, Manali, like all these places that and you've seen them 10,000 times everywhere. But now people are, even within India, exploring so much. You can see that with smaller destinations booming, with the hostel backpacking culture within India growing so much. Like post-COVID, I would say, I have seen so many hostels come up in India. It's absolutely crazy. Like every destination that you go to now, you would be able to find at least one hostel over there now. And even like the homestay culture growing. So I think people are also now more open to experiencing travel in a different way from what we knew. Like it's slower. I would say that not everybody is still open to, like, a lot of my own friends are not open to staying at hostels still. Like hostels, I would say, for me was step one. Then you go to homestays. Then you go to maybe living in a tent in a jungle, and then that's how I would say the progression goes. So I think that's still slow, but I can definitely see it catching up. And even when it comes to like the backpacking culture, with the number of Indians I end up meeting on my trips now, I think it's growing significantly, not as fast, I would say, but that's also because of obviously disposable income being different. But I do feel like it's growing quite a bit, pretty fast. Yeah.
Very interesting insight about global travel content creators and the Indian travel content creators. Can you also throw some light on the CPC divide between the Western influencers and the Indian influencers?
I do feel that it is catching up, but this is a tricky question to answer because I feel like it really depends from creator to creator. I do feel that whatever said and done, it's way easier to still make money when you're not an Indian content creator, because the there are two reasons. Number one is, if you're a content creator in India, you have a very large population to capture. So even 1 million followers here, I would say, is like, yes, it's amazing. Like, now I'm closer to that mark. I'm very, very excited. But if you really think about it from a numbers point of view, you've still captured a very small part of the audience. Let's say if you're just focused on India, I'm just talking about people who, I would not consider myself to be still in that bucket, because I create content in English. I also create content that's mostly international travel. So I am anyway capturing a very small audience, a smaller percentage of that from India. But let's say somebody who's creating content in a like, let's say Hindi, because that's popularly spoken in India, and then further like, let's say budgeted travel, all of that. So even 2 million is a small number for that in India. So I think that's where the things get skewed, because when you see people over there, because now I've had the opportunity to travel with a couple of tourism boards and interact with actually a lot of international creators. Their audience sizes could be 60, 70,000, and or maybe even, let's say, 200, 300,000, and they make as much as you make with 1 million, 2 million followers, or like an audience in India. So I do feel like that disparity is there, but that's purely because of a population size, because for them, capturing that audience in their country is actually a huge, huge number. So I think that's where we see the disparity in your mind, but when you think about it logically, it makes sense. Number two, I would say, is that other than that, in fact, if you then compare the numbers, I would say that it's actually not that different. It's not as drastic as we make it out to be. Yes, with YouTube, because like you said, the CPC is higher. When it comes to ad revenue, yes, it's very different, because the value, they're getting paid in dollars. That's different. But if you just speak in terms of like, let's say only brand sponsorships, then it's not that drastic. But the other thing that people are open to over there that hasn't still caught up in India is the kind of products people would buy. So in India, we're still a very value-driven society. So if we're not getting some educational or some value from it that we can invest in, just like, how parents buy you or like do things for you when you're growing up. At least in my case, it was like, theek hai, if we buy this for you, if this will help you, we can see it helps you. Like, either you get better grades out of this, or you do something, you win a competition after you do this, then it makes sense. Otherwise, this is a waste of our money. That mentality still exists in India. So I can't, as a creator, if I am somebody, let's say, who's very interested in personal development, and I decide that I want to hold weekly sessions at a premium price where I share my knowledge, people may not invest in that because they don't see a direct, like, how do I convert this into something? This is just knowledge. So I think that is a difference, where over there that audience is has that because they have that disposable income from from the age of 18, 16, because they start making money so early because of having that kind of ecosystem. So I think over there, monetizing with brands is the same as India, but monetizing outside, when you want to diversify as a creator, it's way easier to do it outside of India than in India. So I would say that's the big difference.
So, so you guys, as travel content creators and influencers, do you guys collaborate with each other, exchange ideas, or do you guys meet often?
Yeah, I would say the travel content creator, I think it's now in the last year, it has still become a little more, I would say people meet a lot more, because tourism boards have now started launching those fam trips. So I think then you kind of get to meet a lot more creators. I think earlier it didn't exist as much at all, because everybody, and especially in the travel space, I can only speak for the travel space because I do have friends in other spaces of content creation, and they meet a lot more because they create content from one place. We are not there. Like, it's always like, I always tell these, there are a lot of agencies who organize things, and then they'll be like, 1 week before they'll tell us to come, and I'm just like, you can't reach out to a travel content creator and expect them to be in their home city. It's like an unfair expectation to have. So I think that's the reason why I would say travel content creation is the one space where everybody is very like is not as close and closely knit together because of everybody traveling all the time. Especially me, at least I can speak for myself because I am never there. So I have barely gone on too many fam trips. I also find it very stressful to create content with like 10 other content creators in the same room about the same place. That's just my personal stress. So I personally don't do as many fam trips. But other than that, I think people, at least the ones that I follow and I've always followed before even I started my content creation journey, one has been Sharanya. She's truly nomadly. I've always loved her content a lot. There's Shena's Treasury, who like recently came into the space of content creation, but she's so good. I love the kind of messages she puts out, and the way she travels. I think that's super cool. But the OG for me, who I've always loved and who actually inspired me to also get into the field, was Shivya Nath, who's the shooting star. I mean, I've always said this to her as well. And that, she's been the OG. I think there's, at least her blog was a source of inspiration to me. Then her book was a source of inspiration to so many of us, people who love to travel. And yeah, I think these are the ones that I love and follow from India. Yeah.
Okay, let's slightly move away from heavy duty content or topics and kind of lighten the mood. As you know, I am pursuing a bucket list project for many next years and living a digital nomad life. I am curious to know, do you have any bucket list for yourself? And if it exists, can you let our listeners know about that?
Firstly, I'd love to know about your bucket list project because I don't know that, and it sounds very similar to the kind of bucket list project I want to pursue eventually. So after that, please can we circle back to yours as well? I'd love to hear that, and I'm sure the people who are listening and tuning into this would too. But my bucket list project definitely, at least for the next, so I think I take it year by year because it depends on how my interests kind of shape up. For this year, it's oriented to challenging myself physically. So how can I push myself with climbing, with trekking, with diving? So I'm taking up more challenges that way because I feel like I really find a lot of inspiration there. Whenever I come back from trips like those, I feel like I'm the most productive, I'm happiest. So I think that is the goal for this year. So I'm doing a trek in Malaysia that's quite challenging. Then I'm planning on doing Annapurna. Then after that, I'm planning on getting my open water certification finally. Hopefully with no other, because every single time I go for diving, for some reason, I don't know why that ends up happening. I catch a cold and then I'm not able to do the certification because you can't go in deep enough because of the sinuses. So I'm hoping that this time I don't have a cold. So those are the plans for the first part of the year, and then after that I want to go towards Latin South America and kind of explore that side of the world because I haven't even gone there, so it feels like no man's land right now. I don't know what exists, so I'm really excited about that. So that's the goal of this year. But I think for me, the goal is that every year, and I think that ends up happening with, I don't know everybody, but at least with me as a traveler, that to make my traveling more challenging, like make every trip a bit more challenging, because that's personally how I enjoy it now. It's the sad reality of like when you travel all the time and when you travel every month, slowly places start feeling the same, conversations also start feeling very similar. And I at least have started experiencing that now, that I feel that, okay, I've seen churches, this church looks very similar to that. Now it's not as exciting and exhilarating as that was. So for me now it's become very the path is very like motivated towards going deeper into wherever I'm going. So meeting people also that are very different from who I would meet generally. Even hostels now, personally I've stopped staying at hostels. I've moved more towards like homestays. So I think, like I said, right, that progression happens from homestays. Then I'm pretty sure at one point I'll be on a hammock in the jungle. That will be the last step. So, so yeah, I mean that's how I see it. Let's see, and I'm hoping to delve deeper. Basically, that's the goal. Yeah.
Okay, so from what I hear from your answer is that your traveling style is also kind of maturing over a period of time after so much of travel. It's kind of taking a definitive shape, and you are also kind of evolving along with travel. That's the understanding I get, especially when you spoke about going to Latin America, pushing yourself with some extreme sports or hiking or diving, etc., right? Which is, I think it's a natural progression that happens. Our initial years, we want to, check off as many countries as possible, go and see as many things as possible. Then eventually that takes a backseat, and then we are like, okay, for the essence of travel, we want to travel and experience newer and newer things. The constant seeking of newer things kind of evolves our travel, and that is what I hear from whatever you're saying. With respect to the bucket list project for me is also in a very similar line where I am just picking up one skill a year, going really deep in it and traveling as slow as possible, experiencing that skill and going deep in that and making sure that at the end of it, I come out as a person who can very confidently say that, hey, this skill I know as good as any professional would do. That's in a nutshell what my bucket list is like.
Damn, that's so cool. I absolutely love it. Yeah, that's exactly. I feel like after a point of, I'm guessing you also traveled a lot, and then you kind of reach that point where you feel like, okay, going deep is at least, even for me at this point, I honestly feel like maybe for a year or two I'll still be like doing a lot more countries and seeing a lot more cultures. But after that, my idea is also to really just go deep in one, not even like one country, but like also skill based, because I think it is like you said, very very rewarding to do that.
Very true, very true. So, what do you think we can expect from Akansha to explore in 2024?
I think for me, definitely, like I said, the couple of treks that I want to do in the next couple of months. But apart from that, one thing that I really want to do, which is on the cards, is live in Japan, and that is very very big on my bucket list for the year, because it's a country that's really fascinated me from the culture, and this is moving away from like the physical challenge goal, but just like living in a culture that I think is really different from what we have, or like, I mean, at least in my head. Let's see what the notions are like once I actually go there and live there. But I really want to live there for a few months and actually see how that is. It's also a massive country to explore, and there's so much to see. So that's one thing that I really want to do this year, and I think people can see a lot, will be seeing a lot of content from there of how that looks like. So let's see if that ends up happening. And I think apart from that, what mostly people are going to see from my end is me experimenting with a lot of different styles of storytelling, because I think I really only just found my footing in it, even though that was also a reason for a huge part of my growth, like in the last 4-ish months, where I really found my style of how I want to tell stories, what kind of videos do I want to make, and it was also a process of like experimenting. So now I want to dive deeper into that and kind of be able to hone that skill a lot more. So yeah, that's the goal for this year.
Living in Japan long term sounds quite interesting, and I'm pretty sure you will be able to get awesome content out of it. And the moment that you mentioned that you're going to experiment with your content creation and take it deeper, can we expect some Nat Geo kind of documentary from you?
I don't think I'm ever going to get into Nat Geo style of Rongfeng, because this is something people ask me a lot. But I personally create content. I am able to create content, and this is a bane, maybe not a boon, when I am enjoying myself. Otherwise, it's very hard for me, to be honest, to tell stories, because I feel like I'm not being exactly what I said earlier. I'm not able to sleep at night then, because I feel that I'm not being authentic. And when I make Nat Geo style, like which I've tried earlier, which is filming long form, extreme long form with a lot of cinematic element to it, I'm not traveling there, I'm working. It's very work oriented. It's very like every conversation you have is with a purpose to sensationalize it as well on social media so that it's interesting enough for people to hear. And I personally feel like, yeah, it just doesn't feel very authentic to me. So while I am planning on doing some long form content that helps people travel better, that maybe is more like, because a lot of places that I've been to, there's not that much content on it in general that helps people get there, how to get there, all of that. Not really the cinematic content that you're talking about. That's definitely not happening.
All right, all right. So, any parting thoughts or pearls of wisdom for aspiring travel content creators from your side?
I think being authentic is probably would be my biggest advice. That there's so much, like, by the end of the day, every single month you see more and more creators coming up, and the space will only get, I would not say more crowded. I mean, there's space for everybody because social media has democratized fame a lot. So I don't think that there'll ever be like less space that way, but there will be a lot more content. So it's very important to find your unique voice and brand yourself like that, because people need to be able to identify you as something. I think that is very important. So right now I see a lot of creators who are creating a lot of travel content in every field, and then you can't really put a finger to what it is that they love, or like what would you identify them as. Like if you had to give one line about them, like there are people who, let's say if I had to talk about Shivya, I would say slow, deep travel. Like I know her for that. So you need to be able to create that branding for yourself via your content consciously, and also let that be the most authentic you, because only then can you do it every single day, because that's the only way. You can't show up once a week and get away with that. It's very important to be consistent. So if you want to show up every single day, and I need to be myself on this podcast, I also need to be myself when somebody, like I give a talk or interview or whatever, and then you need to be authentic, and it needs to match what you're saying on your Instagram, needs to match what your personality is on this podcast versus everywhere. So I think that would be the most important thing, I'd say.
Thanks a lot, Aakanksha. It was such a pleasure hosting you on this podcast. As the title goes, you're truly fearless and fabulous. Wishing you all the best. Have tons and tons of memories created, tons and tons of fun along the way in 24 and the remaining years to come. I'll be watching your Instagram page for all the stories that you're going to be putting out there. Quite excited about it. Keep inspiring this generation, and happy travel.
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved it, and I think it was great also conversing with you and learning so much. And I think we need to have one podcast now where I ask you the questions, because I think you have so many stories to tell as well. I think that would be really exciting. So maybe next time we can do a flip of the same conversation.
This wraps up the episode of the Bucket List Project podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode and getting a glimpse of Aakanksha Monga's life as a travel influencer. If you've been following her page, this podcast would have given you a different perspective of Aakanksha as a human. I hope you liked what you listened to. And if you did, then please do subscribe to our podcast, which is available both in Spotify and Apple. See you next week, and until then, have a great time.